I love gender neutral pronouns. I've been using them for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. What I love is that I think gender neutral pronouns best reflect my gender identity. So when people use them, I feel really affirmed and really like myself.
For me, they make me happy. I feel happy when people refer to me as they, because it feels true to myself.
You can take agency over how you want to be identified. You get to choose how you're defined, and you're not sort of restricted by what society, what kind of label society puts on you.
A person is a person, and maybe they are defined by those classic gender roles, but it's not necessarily who they are, I guess.
You are also able to broaden the gender pronoun spectrum as well, so you're not restricting it to anything in specific. So normally you would say, oh, well, with boys and girls, or he and her, that kind of thing. You're actually saying they, which will expand that out to include any and all people under the gender spectrum.
You know, for a world and a culture that hasn't really done a really good job of having anything other than highly gendered pronouns, using they it's a really good option, and I feel the way in which people are using it opens up the word and opens up the language. And because so many people use it with different identities and backgrounds, it's even if you're still using they, it's still got a question mark of you need to know me more before you can make any assumptions.
A lot of times people make assumptions about how someone feels or how someone experiences their gender based on how they express it. So based on what clothes they wear or how their hair is. But really, everyone's gender identity is something that is very much personally theirs, and you can't tell how someone feels without asking them or without them telling you. I think using they, them pronouns is a way that you can, I guess, help to respect that until someone's told you you're not really sure. So, for example, if you're meeting someone in a work context or you know, making a new friend, I think it can be a useful placeholder until you've had that conversation.
Yeah, I've been in shops before and people will turn around and they'll say, hey, can I help you, sir? And all of a sudden they'll catch and themselves and they'll be like, oh, sorry. And that's a little bit awkward for them. And I don't care. They've just quickly turned around and said something. So I think if people learn to use the other pronouns, they'll just not make as many mistakes and avoid awkward situations.
It gives people like that an opportunity to self-define and to articulate how they want to be referred to, and make space so that their pronouns are legitimate and respected.
I am very inspired by my teenage daughter, who, when she sees somebody wearing fabulous clothes on the street, says, oh, I like their outfit. And I think this allows us to imagine gender without such restrictive binaries. We don't have assumptions about what looks good masculine or what is masculine behaviour or what a woman should behave like. It takes away a lot of those injunctions to behave or act, perform gender in a particular way.
Giving license to whomever you're talking about, if they're there in person, to let them tell you if they have a preferred set of pronouns.
I use he, him pronouns now, but that's not the pronouns that I've used my whole life. When I got to university, that I met other people and I had that moment of realizing that there were other options. My identity, which was so important and is still important, to have that seen and reflected made me feel like I was home, like there was a spot for me, and that the people around me really cared and wanted to see me, not what they thought of me.
I think we can all benefit from using gender neutral pronouns. I think the space to imagine yourself without the constrictions of either masculinity or femininity are huge. And for children in particular, the potential to grow and be rich and complex people who are different selves on different days is also one of the things I like about they as a as a kind of, there's a playfulness with a plural there that I think is truer to our identities and our lived everyday lives.
That child that's sitting on the bed wondering, and possibly at times suicidal and not coping with those thoughts, that's where it benefits, because it actually gives them an ability to be themselves and really gives them that time to look at themselves of what they want to be, who they're choosing to be, who they're choosing to identify, and what label they want to put out to society, for society to label them.
Sometimes when you're thinking of a particular individual and you do have an association, perhaps through their gendered name, of what their pronoun might be, and when you use they, you call yourself back from making those assumptions, and I think that's very powerful. It's really good for our brains too, to, you know, reprogram some neural pathways. It's a win for everybody.
It's hugely empowering for the people who identify as gender neutral or non-binary, but it is also inclusive of the people who do identify as men or women. It's inclusive of everyone. It doesn't leave anyone out.
A, you're not making assumptions about anyone's gender. B, you're making a lot more people comfortable with your language by not going he or she or just assuming based on looks, because you never know what someone's gender identity is going to be based on how they look.
For some people, when they first hear they, them pronouns, they're a bit unsure of the grammar. And I think just hearing people using gender neutral pronouns in everyday language helps everyone become more comfortable and confident in using them when they need to. There's a lot of times when we'd use gender neutral pronouns in everyday language anyway. So, for example, if you were on a train and somebody dropped their hat, you'd be like, oh no, they dropped their hat.
Oh, that person, someone's left their phone there.
If you have a friend who's gone to the doctor, you ask, what did they say? You have a student in a classroom, you might be talking about how they behave.
A lot of us are pretty practiced at it anyway, and I think having an additional opportunity to really make space for people to practice and a safe space for people to learn is really important. So a lot of people will want to try and build their confidence and try it out a bit more often, and so I think this is a great opportunity to do that.
We use they as a singular all the time, so grammatically there's nothing incorrect about using they for singular.
In Australia with English, we can actually unlearn some of our poor behaviour and learn a new way of doing this.
There's a lot of work across a lot of different languages to make more space for pronouns to be more inclusive. So using they, them is what we're doing in English, but also in France at the moment, they're doing great work to firm up their options for gender neutral pronouns, and they have a language authority that specifies the correct way that things should be worded, and that authority is on board with redoing their language and putting in a new set. So I think that's really exciting.
The use of singular they, them has been used so often since Shakespeare, since in Oscar Wilde books. Like, why are people so stuck in one form of grammar when they're still willing to introduce new words to their vocabulary? Like, why is a change different when something new is... Why is it so much easier to accept a new language, a new word into our language rather than to change?
I think English changes all the time, and so, you know, there are some concerns around whether the use of the singular is correct. I don't buy into that argument. I think it's one of the things that actually, even historically, Shakespeare has used they as singular. But I also think we need to have liberty to play with our language and to change it according to the worlds that we live in.